This is part 8 of the Kyosho Ultima RT6 Stadium Truck build series. As you can see, I have the shocks assembled and mounted. The shock assembly went together just as any normal Kyosho shock assembly goes. For the Laser ZX6 it was about the same, and the ZX5 for that matter. Same exact shocks. There's one small difference. Well, there's two differences. First is the shock cap that they give you. On the Laser ZX6 they give you aluminum shock caps. Here they give you plastic shock caps, just straight from the parts tree. They don't give you aluminum caps. Now, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I think that plastic shock caps are probably in some ways better because if you're going to break something, I'd rather break a shock cap than a shock tower. An aluminum shock cap will transfer the force to the tower. But on the other hand, considering the cost of the kit, I'm a little disappointed that they didn't include aluminum shock caps. I think those should have been included. But either way, if cost isn't an issue, this is immaterial to me as to whether they include aluminum or plastic caps. The shock pistons that are included are 5-hole pistons. And I would assume that these 5-hole pistons, you can see right here, are 5 by 1.2 millimeter. The Laser ZX6 came with 2 by 1.6 millimeter pistons, so a very different setup that they give you. And again, they do not tell you a baseline setup for what shock oil to use. Now, generally speaking, when you have more smaller holes, it gives you less low-speed damping. So like around corners, the car will roll a little more. But the high-speed damping, like your pack, will be larger. So landing off of jumps, there'll be more pack in the shock. So considering that, I am starting with a baseline setup here of 25 weight oil in the rear shocks and 30 weight oil in the front shocks. We'll see how that feels. I did not perfectly bleed the front shocks. They have a little bit of air in them, but considering how I'm probably going to be experimenting with different oils, initially, I'm not too concerned about it. It's not too big a deal. But 30 front, 25 rear. They do have you put 3 millimeters of plastic spacers on the rear shocks on the outside to limit the up travel. And then on the front shocks, you put a 2 millimeter spacer on the inside as a down travel limiter. So you're limiting droop on the front and you're limiting up travel on the rear. Now, what's interesting about the front is that, here, I'll just show you in the manual. So they have you put a spacer in the front as a down travel limiter, and at the same time, so you're taking droop out there, they're having you install the small shock end and not threading it in completely, presumably to give you a bit more droop. So I'm wondering if these two effects kind of cancel out somewhat. This will increase droop, this will decrease droop. What the net effect is in total, I don't know. It would be nice if they gave you more of these sort of medium-sized shock ends. You only get one of these per parts tree, but you get 2 of these per parts tree and 1 long shock end per parts tree. So I would like to have on the tree, let me see if I can get a tree out here as an example. So you get 2 short, 1 medium, and 1 long. Why not just give me 2 short, 2 medium, and 2 long for each pair of shocks? That would make more sense. So anyway, they kind of, that's my opinion on what I'd like them to do. But again, shocks went together fine. They mounted fine. You do have to put a few spacers in to mount the shocks. So on the front, you put a 1 millimeter spacer behind the shock bushing. And then on the rear, you put a 2 millimeter spacer behind the bushing and a 2 millimeter spacer behind the shock. So by the time you get through this part of the build, you've already used, I think, most or all of the 2 millimeter plastic spacers. I have to go back and look through, the not completely depleted parts trees to see if there are any remaining 2 millimeter spacers. I don't think there are. So what's left after this? If we get here, I have to do the battery plate, so that gets mounted. And then after that, what do I got here? Oh, so that's one for mid motor, that's for the rear motor setup. I mount the speed control and the receiver, motor, so basically all the electronics mounting, and that's it, really. And plus the body, so there's nothing really special going forward. So I'll probably end the build series here, since, I mean, literally, there's this stuff is just trivial, mounting the battery plate. There's nothing special about that. So I'll close it off here, and I did try to practice mount some sets of tires on these quick mount or quick release hubs here. They mount okay. I mean, you do have to use a little bit of force to actually push them in, so don't expect that, once you push it in a little bit that it'll just, mount itself. You have to make sure that it's mounted. So mount it in and then pull it back out a little bit to make sure that it actually clicks in, or that it's actually mounted. Otherwise, if it pulls out, then you got to push it in even harder. So, this does take a little bit of effort to actually push the rim in. The rims themselves, get a set here. So here I've mounted a set of Proline Edge front tires. The rims do not come with holes drilled into the rims. Most people now, they just, punch holes in the tires themselves. I don't like doing that because you end up losing tread, even though it's a small amount of tread. I'd rather just drill holes in the rims. And I know the reason why, people prefer to punch holes in the tires rather than on the inside of the rim is because the tire is spinning, and so centrifugal force will push water or moisture or dirt out of the tire this way as the tire is spinning, and you won't get that much of an effect, or you won't get any of that effect if you drill holes on the inside of the rim. But I'm just used to having holes on the inside of the rim, so I got to actually go through and drill holes here retroactively because I forgot to do that when I mounted these tires. Okay, so just bear that in mind if you're going to use the Kyosho rims. Also, DE Racing makes quick mount rims for the RT6, and they also do not have holes pre-drilled. So if you want those holes, you got to drill them yourself. As for the build itself, I'd say it was okay. Nothing spectacular, just like every Kyosho kit that I built so far. You got to take your time with it. You got to make sure you have your calipers and organize all your parts correctly. Otherwise, you're going to screw something up. I do really like the parts quality. The plastics are nice and chunky and dense. The shocks are amazing. The drivetrain goes together very nicely. I thought it was very thoughtful of them to do this little spacer here to push the motor to the right to kind of balance the weight of the motor towards the center line. I think that's a nice feature that you don't see on other chassis, at least as far as I'm aware, straight out of the box. Let's see, what else do I like about this? Yeah, the quick release is cool. The suspension goes together nicely. Like, there's no bind in the arms or the hinge pins as you put everything together, so everything will fall on its own weight, before you even mount the shocks. So the suspension movement is relatively free. The ball cups don't bind up like on the associated B5, for example. You have to pinch the ball cups or put black grease in them to make sure there's little to no bind between the ball cup and the ball stud. Kyosho ball cups work just fine. There's no issues there. It's more like the low-C ball cups. They also work very well. Let's see. Is there anything else I should mention? Nothing really comes to mind here. I imagine the electronics mounting might be a little bit tight. Just looking forward here because, the shorty pack's going to mount this way. And in the manual, I believe, so that's the motor. Yeah, so over here, where is it? Yeah, right over here. They're going to want you to mount the speed control on a top plate here, and then the receiver goes off to the side here. So that means they want you to put the receiver here. That seems a little peculiar. So I'll have to figure out a better place to put the receiver. So that might be a little on the tight side. Maybe put it up front or something. I don't know. Any other thoughts? None really. There's a lot of setup options here. You get plenty of roll center and camber gain options. There's spacers inside the rear hub carriers. You can move that forward or backward to change the wheelbase and weight distribution. All the things you'd expect out of any real racing kit for adjustment. You get it with this, so that's great. I would say more adjustability than my old T4, which was a great truck. I mean, I had a really great setup for it, so it didn't matter. But I look forward to running a truck that basically is more or less what the T4 should have been in terms of parts quality and drivetrain quality. I just got to get a body painted and cut and everything, and it'll be ready to go. So provisionally, this is it for the RT6 build series. I hope you found this informative. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments section, and thanks for watching.